Hi, this is Mr. Bordelon. Today we're going to be talking about demand as our concept. So, demand generally refers to whether someone is willing and able to buy a particular product. That's all demand is. Okay, but those two elements, willing and able, are required. So, what does that mean exactly? All right, let's say that you are interested in getting a Maserati, which is in some cases a several hundred thousands of dollars for a car. All right, most students don't have that, so you might be willing to buy that car but unable. All right, so in that case, you would say that you are not in the market. You do not have demand for that product. But consider the Ford Pinto. The Ford Pinto was a car made in the late 70s, which had a bad habit of exploding on impact whenever it got into a car accident. Okay? You might be able to find one for maybe $100 to $200 or something like that. But it's a good bet that even though you might be able to fork over that money, you're going to be unwilling to, step foot in that death trap. So that's what we mean on this end. If you're not willing and you're not able, then you're not in the market. But if you are willing and able to buy the product, then ultimately you have demand for that product. You are in the market, as it were. Okay? Now, here's the thing about this. Once we know that you have demand for the product, then the question becomes, how much are we going to buy at a certain price? And that is answered by the law of demand. Now, the law of demand states that as price increases, quantity demanded will decrease. And as price decreases, quantity demanded will increase. And notice that language there, okay? I'm not saying demand, I'm saying quantity demanded, okay? The reason why is because that I'm being that specific is because price is only going to affect the quantity demanded. We already know that you're in the market for, let's say, Oreo cookies, that you're willing and able to buy those. What we want to know now is if the price changes on that, how much will you buy at a particular price? You are already in the market. We just want to know how much you want to buy. That's it. Okay? So keep those ideas separate, because with demand, it tells you that you're interested in the product, that you're in the market. With law of demand, we just already know you're in the market. We just want to know how much you want to buy. All right? So this can actually, in terms of law of demand, if you're familiar with, any kind of science or anything like that, you know that, this has to be something that you agree with no matter what. So let's take a look. We're going to create something called a demand schedule. All a schedule is a list of prices and quantities together. That's all it is. It's a table. So say 2, 3, 4, 5, and we'll say 10, 8, 6, 4, 2. Okay? So as the price increases, my quantity demanded will decrease, and vice versa on this end. So that's the basic structure of what we're kind of talking about for this point. Now, let's put those numbers back. Now, if you notice, this is obviously something that we can plot algebraically. So, here we go. Now, I like to separate the demand curve into a blue color, so that's what we're going to be using here. But this is your demand curve. And in terms of plotting this out, I'll write this. This must also agree with the law of demand, and sure enough, it's going to. As price decreases from, say, P2 to P1, my quantity will decrease from Q2 to Q1. And so that's kind of the basic structure of what you have on this end. Now, that being said, everything that we talked about here just now is basically a moment locked in time. Think of your baby pictures, okay? In your baby picture, you are covered in cake and, happy, and you're made of mess, but you're always stuck in that moment in time. I want you to think of the demand curve as that baby picture, okay? Because this is also a moment locked in time for whatever product this is, whether it's cars, whether it's oranges, Oreos, or anything else you can imagine on this end. But here's the thing. What we're talking about on this end is that if we have a change in price, then that's going to lead to a change in quantity demanded, okay? And that means that there's going to be a movement along the curve. So let's say I'm here at point A and this is point B. Okay? If I want to go from A to B, then that means I'm going to increase my price from P1 to P2, and Q1 to Q2 will decrease. But notice what causes the change is the change in price. Okay? For mathematical and scientific terms, the change in price, that's the independent variable. The quantity is the dependent variable on this end. So that being said, if you think about the baby picture, that was certainly a long time ago. Now think of a picture of you, on this end. That baby picture is no longer accurate. So if you needed a new picture, ultimately what are you going to do? You're going to have to take another picture. Now, just before we get to that, I want to highlight an idea that may be familiar with science and math people. It's something called ceteris paribus. Ceteris paribus is a mathematical assumption that assumes everything is locked into place except for what we're analyzing. And in this case, ceteris paribus has locked this graph into place because what we're analyzing is the change in price and how that affects quantity. But if we want to ultimately see something else affect demand, in other words, affect the number of people who are willing and able to buy the product, then we have to drop this mathematical assumption and we allow the curve to shift. And that is what we're going to do now. So, drawing this out. Here's my first demand curve. I'm just going to draw these all at once. So, if I have an increase in demand, that's a shift to the right, that's going to be overall demand is growing. That is, more people are willing and able to buy the product than more before, more consumers. If I have a decrease in demand, then ultimately that's going to be a shift to the left from D1 to D3. Okay, less people are willing and able to buy that product. Notice the words that I'm using. I'm saying increase and decrease. Okay, and I'm saying shift to the right, shift to the left. I want you to avoid using the words up and down. All right, there's a reason for it, which you can see when we get to supply. But for now, increase, decrease, left and right. So here's the thing. What causes this change? Well, before we had a change in price causing a change in quantity demanded. And that's going to be a movement along the curve. But if it's a change in anything else, which some books use TRIBE as an acronym, some books use MERIT, but a change in anything else, that's going to be a change in demand. And that will be a shift of the entire curve. All right. So what causes demand to shift? Well, first off, one of the things is market size. And I'm going to use the MERIT acronym because I'm more familiar with that. Market size is literally just the number of people that are in the market. So for example, if we're talking about demand, Oviedo in Central Florida, once had a population of 20,000 people. That was something around 2000, the year 2000. Nowadays, it has closer to 40,000. So after 20 years, we've doubled our population. Theoretically, what would happen to the demand for pizza in Oviedo? Well, the obvious answer is that it would have to increase. Okay? Simply because there's more people, therefore surely one more person would want pizza. So that's really what we're talking about on that end. Of course, if, a lot of people start leaving Oviedo, then the demand for pizza would end up decreasing. The second is expectations of a future price. Now, this is important to distinguish. Okay, yes, we are talking about prices. And yes, I said if a change in price, that leads to a change in quantity. But the key word here is future prices. Put it this way. Let's say you wanted to buy a Nintendo Switch. All right now they're going for roughly $300, if you can get them in a store. But that at Christmas, they're going to drop the price at $250. What happens to your demand right now for the Nintendo Switch? Well, in that particular case, it would decrease. Okay, so we would do from D1 to D3. But now let's say that it's Christmas time, and you know that if you don't buy it now, the price is going to go back up in January to $300. In that case, your demand would increase. So understand, yes, we're focused on price, but more specifically, our behavior is based on when the price is going to happen. Okay? When does the price change? Put this another word. Sales. That's really all we're talking about here. Now I'm going to give you R, but I'm going to come back to it because I need to have a little bit more space for graphing, and that's related goods. I'm going to also come back to, because I want a little bit more space than this, but that's income. T stands for consumer taste, okay? So think of it like Justin Bieber, okay? When Justin Bieber was really popular, demand for his music increased. And then as he started to age, out of his main demographic, demand for his music started to decrease, okay? So let's go to related goods a minute. Related goods deals with two different types of goods: substitutes and complements. Now, this is complements with an E, not an I. Now, a substitute is a good that replaces another good, and that's pretty straightforward. A complement, these are goods that are bought together. So if we're talking about substitutes, for example, sneakers versus Crocs, Oreos versus Chips Ahoy, those would be substitutes. And understand, I'm just giving you a general idea on that. Complements are typically, like I said, things that are bought together. So think, milk and eggs, or toothpaste and toothbrushes, that kind of thing. Thing about this is that we have to come up with an objective idea. So this is where the graphs come in. Now, we're going to work with substitutes first. To solve the problem for substitutes and complements, we're going to do two graphs. And let's say this is Oreos versus Chips Ahoy. Okay? And the question is, how do you know on this end if they're substitutes in some form? Well, either the problem will tell you, in terms of doing this, or alternatively, they will give you enough information that you could actually draw out the problem, and solve it that way. And that is an expectation on this end. So be prepared for it on the exams. So there you go. So in the first graph will always be a change in price. So let's say that Oreos start off at $4 a box and you're willing to buy 8 boxes at that amount. But now the price jumps to $6 a box. And you're only willing to buy, say, 3 boxes at that point. Okay? Now, does that mean that you're going to leave the grocery store without, a whole bunch of cookies? No. Next door to it is ultimately Chips Ahoy. So if ultimately the price gets too high for what we're comfortable paying for it, we're ultimately going to substitute it with a similar good. So as the price for Oreos climbs, the demand for Oreos would increase. Okay? Now, the opposite also has to be true. Okay? If the price for Oreos drops from $6 to $4, that means we're going to buy, 5 more boxes than what we were before. Okay? So in that particular case, what we would end up doing is that if we're buying more Oreos, we don't need as many Chips Ahoy. So demand would decrease on that end. Okay? So this is how we're ultimately talking about the relationship with substitutes. Now, let's take it as a matter of complements. Now, in this case, let's use Oreos and milk. Okay? So here are Oreos. Here's milk. All right? Same deal as before. Now, let's say, here's my demand here. Here's my demand here. Now, let's say the price of Oreos, again, was $4. And at $4, I bought 8 boxes. Now the price jumps to $6. And at $6, I'm going to buy 3 boxes. Okay? Great. Now, the thing about this is let's say the price drops from $6 to $4. If that's the case, then I'm going to certainly buy more Oreos. But that also means that I'm going to need to buy more milk, since I buy milk with Oreos. So in that case, demand increases. Like that. Of course, the opposite also has to be true. Okay? If we're talking about a decrease in price from $6 to $4, an increase in price from $4 to $6, then I'm buying less Oreos. Okay? That means I don't need as much milk. So my demand for milk would ultimately decrease. Okay? Now, here's the thing, guys. For macro, this often does not come up. All right? So if it does come up, it'll be one question on a multiple choice. Micro students, this idea is going to come up again. All right? So just be aware of it. Okay? Especially when we start talking about a concept called elasticity. But we'll get there. All right. So let's go to income now. All right. So with income, this is just simply about money in some form. And it deals also with two different types of goods. What we call normal goods and inferior goods. Now, here's the thing about this. Normal and inferior, if you ask any English teacher, in terms of the kind of words these are adjectives. Adjectives describe other nouns, qualities, age, characteristics, etc. Okay? Here's the thing about this. Normal and inferior. Keep it in the back of your mind as we go through this on this end. And I'm going to give you the basic definitions for this. A normal good is a good you buy more of as your income increases. So if your income increases, and that good is a normal good, then your demand for that normal good is increase. Okay? Of course, the opposite also has to be true. If your income decreases, your demand for that good has to decrease. All right? An inferior good is a good in which if your income increases, your demand for that good will decrease. Similarly, if your income decreases, wow, really? If your income decreases, then your demand for that good will increase. Okay, so this is some basic shorthand to read what's going on of what I just mentioned. Now, that being said, look at what we've written here. These are not, subjective ideas. It's about income. There is no quality in this definition. Now, why is that? Well, the answer comes back to one of the things we talked about earlier in terms of measuring things, making them more quantifiable in economics. We have to come up with an objective definition. Think of it this way. If you like Harry Potter, you probably like Harry Potter quite a lot, right? Great. How much do you like Harry Potter? Quantify that. And the answer is pretty much you really can't. I mean, yes, you could come up with some random number and we could pull that out of the hat and whatever. But the truth of the matter is you can't quantify how much you like Harry Potter. And that's where the problem lies. But let's say that your income increases, okay? Your demand for, say, a Harry Potter bobblehead, may increase at that point, okay? So as your income increases, you're buying more Harry Potter things. That would be considered a normal good. And let's say, for some reason, The Last Avatar was an inferior good in that case, okay? As your income increases, you're buying less Avatar goods in that particular case. And I'm not trying to start a fight between Avatar and, Harry Potter fans. It's just an example on this end. But understand that what we're doing is we're identifying goods, by your income change. Now, why do we do that? It comes back to the problem of subjectivity. There are some things that we just absolutely cannot give a full measurement to. And so that's why we talk about this in terms of income. Because if we talk about this in terms of income, then we can give some kind of full measure on this end. All right. And that is largely it when we talk about demand. All right. If you have any questions, email me and I'll be glad to help out. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.